Sometimes you get the love of your life when you're too young and you don't know how to handle it. And so I think that was me.
At 66, Tanya Tucker is finally telling the truth about her whirlwind romance with Glen Campbell. They were country music royalty, but behind the fame was a love story torn apart by pressure and pain. Fans saw the spotlight, but never the heartbreak that came with it. In this video, you'll discover how fame didn't just shape their careers, it shattered their relationship. Tanya reveals what happened from passionate beginnings to a sudden, painful end. Stay tuned as we uncover the emotional story behind two legends and the price they paid for stardom. When worlds collided, Tanya Tucker exploded onto the country music scene at 13 with Delta Dawn. She became famous while most kids were still figuring out who they were. By her early 20s, she had already changed records, cities, lovers, and reputations. She moved between Nashville and Los Angeles, chasing pop appeal and wild nights while carving out hits as fast as critics tried to write her off. She reached a very low point by 1983, when heartache, broken relationships, and declining radio play caught up with her, and she retreated to Nashville to regroup. She later said she began drinking out of loneliness because it became a routine that she'd return from the roads to hotel rooms that suddenly felt empty. These hotel rooms used to be very glamorous, and she used to be so excited to return to them, but everything changed, and suddenly they felt hollow. Meanwhile, Glen Campbell had lived a much longer chapter when they met. He grew up one of 12 children in Arkansas, became part of the famed Wrecking Crew in LA, and moved from session musician to solo star with hits like Gentle on My Mind, Wichita Lineman, and Rhinestone Cowboy. By the late 1970s, he hosted the CMA Awards and commanded respect as one of country music's most polished professionals. In 1980, their worlds suddenly overlapped. Tanya had signed with MCA and released the album Dream Lovers, which included 2 duets with Glen, Dream Lover, and My Song. They clicked instantly, seeing their voices layered in studio harmony and their personas sparking something electric on stage. That duet, Dream Lover, grabbed attention, garnering a Grammy nomination and hinting at something deeper between the lines of the performance. Tanya says Glen threw her a lavish 22nd birthday party with glitz and cash. He was about 44 years old, and she was 22, and then it made headlines. But the glamour caused growing chaos. Both of them became tangled up in substance use, fueled by schedules and fame. Tanya says that she knew how to push his buttons, sometimes without even meaning to, and in trying to help him stop drinking and using, she ended up losing herself to the very same pull. She reflects now that at the time, she thought there were more fish in the sea, chased freedom and escape, and thought that healing someone might save her from chaos. But what happened was a raw collision in which neither got away unscathed. While Tanya calls him the love of her life, Glen frames it differently. He later wrote letters about their time together as my insanity, using a dismissive tone in interviews and his autobiography. He made it seem like everything they shared was beginning to disgust him. He claimed that the relationship happened shortly after his divorce from Sarah and said he wasn't madly in love with her. It was just something he enjoyed the moment with. Rumors swirled that Glen knocked out 2 of Tanya's front teeth during an intense fight. She filed a lawsuit for $3 million, which he denied. But even without proof, the emotional and psychological damage weighed heavier than the teeth. They left scars deeper than any courtroom drama could show or even imagine to act. As they clashed, Tanya's career quietly slipped. By 1983, she had moved away from pop ambitions. Her label deals had faltered, and she nearly disappeared from the charts. Her family urged her back to Nashville, where she lived more quietly. By 1988, she entered the Betty Ford Center for Help and signed with Capitol Records. She found her footing again with up-tempo hits like One Love at a Time and Just Another Love, both #1s that announced her return. She looked at Glen's chapter with regret and profound clarity through that rise. She says she was too young, too reactive, and chasing a fantasy, but through all the scars and setbacks, she knew that time shaped her into something more real. Many decades later, at the age of 66, she still calls Glen the love of her life. She says she pushed hard and thought that she had endless options. She thought she could fix him, and through that effort, she almost broke herself. She says now that sometimes you get the love of your life when you're too young and don't even know how to handle it. Time revealed what she already felt. When Glen died in August 2017 at the age of 71, after a long battle with Alzheimer's, Tanya released a tribute called Forever Loving You. She performed it publicly around the time of his funeral. His widow responded with criticism, though some called it poorly timed. Regardless, Tanya held firm that it was her way to honor him and raise awareness of Alzheimer's with honesty, and stood by that emotion even when the others questioned her motives. Through all this, Tanya never asked for pity. She invited the truth and talked about feeling him beside her at night, as if no time had passed. She sees that song and her public reckoning as steps toward acceptance. He called it insanity, but she called it her strategy for survival. Their time together lasted just over 1 year, but its shadow stretched across decades. It shaped her music, her relationships, and her resolve. This isn't trivia or tabloid fodder. It's the story of two human souls, artists ripped between fame and addiction, love and regret. Tanya wasn't the damsel in distress. She was the one dancing on edges too sharp for her age. She couldn't help him, but maybe she helped all of us by telling her the truth. Who they were before the fire. Tanya Denise Tucker was born on the 10th of October in 1958 in Seminole, Texas, the youngest of 3 children in a family that moved often. She grew up between Texas, Arizona, Nevada, and Utah, singing along to her parents' records. At the same time, her dad drove her to local clubs so she would have a platform to perform as a child, jumping from talent shows to occasional gigs with Ernest Tubb or Mel Tillis. From age 8, she knew she wanted to be a country singer, and by 13, she had landed Delta Dawn, which became a top 10 hit and launched her into the spotlight. Those early hits she released, What's Your Mama's Name?, Blood Red and Going Down, and Would You Lay With Me in a Field of Stone, all tackled mature subjects and demanded a presence usually reserved for artists older and much more experienced than her. She handled them like a veteran. This built her reputation as a fiercely independent young voice with grit. Once she turned 16, she signed a $1.5 million contract with MCA Records. She wanted control, but the label pushed a pop-friendly image, producing hits like Lizzie and the Rain Man and San Antonio Stroll. Discontent, she sought a new team, including producer Jerry Crutchfield, who allowed her more creative input, steering her back toward authentic country expression. That led to TNT in 1998, a rock-tinged album with bold visuals and Texas, When I Die. It established her as an outlaw country figure, edgy, uncompromising, and unafraid of any controversy that the public threw. Despite her early success, Tanya's life on tour was hollow. She recalls returning nightly to some empty hotel rooms and filling that loneliness with drinking. She would drink and drink to stupor. The LA party scene became seductive. She moved west in 1978, chasing crossover dreams while embracing excess. She admitted later that staying up too late, drinking too much, and feeling wild became the story instead of the music. As the charts cooled off and radio spins dropped, she felt unmoored by her mid-20s. Meanwhile, Glen Campbell was already several decades into life. Born in Arkansas, one of 12, he rose to fame first as a session guitarist in the famed Wrecking Crew in LA, backing icons like Frank Sinatra and Elvis Presley before launching a solo career. Hits like Gentle on My Mind, Wichita Lineman, and Rhinestone Cowboy made him a household name. He hosted the Glen Campbell Good Time Hour, was part of the Grand Ole Opry, and carried an image of polished professionalism. He had been married several times, fathered children, and earned respect as both musician and media figure. However, his success came at a costly price. From the 1970s into the early 1980s, he battled alcoholism and cocaine use. Although he cleaned up for some years, his fourth wife, Kim, helped him turn things around as relapses occurred. Substance abuse shadowed his career, making him more desperate and anxious to go any mile regardless of the cost and consequences. He performed the U.S. national anthem at the 1980 Republican National Convention, acknowledging prestige. Still, his private life remained burdened because he carried a heavy weight for even 2 people to bear. Both of them were Texans. They met in 1980 at a Fort Worth radio station, Tanya on the Rise, Glen, a veteran star. That shared origin felt meaningful later. At that moment, Glen was divorced from Sarah Barg Davis and not yet married to Kim. Tanya was 20, Glen 42. They recorded Dream Lover and My Song and followed that with Pecos Promenade, a duet featured on a movie soundtrack, with each studio session layering ambition, desire, and risk. Tanya was chasing validation through her music and recklessness, and Glen was chasing solace in success and hope for normalcy at home. They seemed to offer each other something the other lacked. She offered reckless youth and emotional intensity. He provided stability and creative legitimacy, but underneath, both were fighting loneliness and searching for connection in music, addiction, fame, and fear. So when their voices began blending in studio harmonies and their chemistry sparked in public venues, it felt like a collision and salvation. Tanya saw love in Glen's presence. Decades later, she still says he was the love of her life. Glen, in interviews, called their time "my insanity," suggesting it was something chaotic he walked away from once he regained control. Their definitions diverged, but their map of pain and resonance was nearly the same. Now, each of them reflects with regret, gratitude, and lingering presence. Their personal histories shaped them into figures that have already been destined to clash. We saw how Tanya brought a deep survival instinct, forged through early exposure to adult themes and fame. But Glen carried the weight of expectations and a battle with addiction after so many years of acclaim. Each saw a mirror to both promise and pain in the other. That makes their story feel inevitable. It was not very popular per se. It didn't steal headlines as loud as usual, but it was two complex lives drawn together in urgent intensity. The storm. Going further, we are made to see how Tanya and Glen's time together unfolded in a blur of recording studios, late-night parties, performances, and conflict, all wrapped up in a whirlwind that lasted just over a year but felt eternal in impact. A duo or group nominated them for Best Country Vocal Performance in 1981, the best duet recorded in that period. Their shared appearances and tour dates cemented their connection in the public imagination. They always went out together, having fun, seeing sights, touring the environment, and it sounded like they were already on a ship. So many people thought so. Glen celebrated Tanya's 22nd birthday in Los Angeles with a lavish party. Very high and luxurious, they spent more than people's GDP. It was reportedly costing over $57,000. That generosity spoke to his pride in their bond, but triggered headlines, showing how their personal life quickly became a public spectacle. Around that time, Tanya was in between record deals around that time, and the attention contributed to excitement and complication. Music wasn't enough. They were feeding off each other, good and bad. Outside the fame, substance use casts a very long shadow. By her early 20s, Tanya drank deeply to fill emotional emptiness between shows, often returning to silent hotel rooms after adoring crowds. Glen had become known as a consummate professional, but privately, he struggled with alcoholism and hard drug addiction. He was navigating post-divorce life, seeking stability while fighting relapse. Together, they traded pain and relief, sometimes healing, sometimes hurting one another in ways they barely understood. The pressure reached a peak when Tanya filed a lawsuit alleging Glen knocked out 2 of her front teeth during a fight. He denied it, but the allegation revealed how deeply volatile things had become. Tanya later admitted that she was the very one who provoked the conflict. She said she knew how to push the buttons on him, and in attempting to pull him back from addiction, she burned herself up in the process. She believed she could fix him, but she got pulled under instead. Public perception oscillated. Magazines declared them the rhinestone couple, covering their every move. But that image couldn't contain what was happening behind closed doors. Their fights grew louder, addictions worsened, and creative momentum stalled. By mid-1982, the music partnership had unraveled, their personal lives frayed, and engagement rumors vanished as quickly as they appeared. Tanya's music career suffered accordingly. After a label switch, singles faltered. Her reputation as a wild, partying musician scared off radio programmers. Her father helped her relocate to Nashville, where family intervention encouraged rehab at the Betty Ford Center in 1988. She signed with Capitol Records and relaunched in 1988 with Girls Like Me, followed by hits like One Love at a Time and Just Another Love, reclaiming her voice and chart position. Glen's life also took a turn. He married Kimberly Woolen in 1982. He built a more private, peaceful, and serene life over the following 3 decades, becoming a father again, and mostly stepping out of headlines. In 2011 came the Alzheimer's diagnosis. He withdrew from touring, and the documentary I'll Be Me captured his emotional final performances. He passed away in August 2017, at the age of 81, leaving a legacy tangled with fame, loss, and a chapter with Tanya that neither of them described the same way. Through all that, Tanya kept on telling her version of that storm. She chased intensity, collided with addiction, got close to healing, and realized lessons that took decades to understand. She remained unapologetic about love turned destructive, proud of her talent, and stubborn honesty. Glen barely mentioned her in interviews later, calling her time insanity, while she, in turn, called it survival, regret, but also love. They may have shared just one intense year, but the fallout colored everything that came after. She intentionally began to rebuild and reclaim her career. He found domestic peace before illness. Their shared time is documented in photographs and performances, but the memories diverge in meaning. One saw chaos and escaped from it out of fear, while the other saw a love that shaped her into the survivor she became, healing. The whirlwind between Tanya Tucker and Glen Campbell was over almost as quickly as it began, but the emotional residue didn't fade away. For both of them, that brief time left marks that influenced nearly every personal and professional choice that followed. They walked away, but the weight of what they experienced clung to them in very different ways. After their breakup, Tanya didn't give interviews right away. She didn't try to clear her name or control the narrative. Instead, she pulled back. The pain was too fresh, and she hadn't figured out how to talk about it without slipping into the emotions all over again. By the mid-1980s, she had nearly vanished from the charts. The hits stopped coming, and the labels that once pursued her now saw her as complex, unpredictable, or burned out. She wasn't any of those things she was perceived to be. She was lost in moments and circumstances. That loss wasn't just about Glen, it was everything to her, which is why it broke her so badly. A career that began at 13 had turned into a machine that she couldn't stop. She'd been in the public eye since she was a kid, and now she couldn't recognize herself. She spent her nights trying to fill the ache of being alone with drinking and escapism. The applause she used to live for started feeling empty. It didn't matter whether the world validated her anymore. She felt sick and tired of life because nothing worked out well. Everything seemed to be going well, and when the crowds left, she was silent and had a long list of regrets. She desperately wished she could turn back the hands of time and undo everything she had done earlier, but it seemed impossible. Her life was gradually falling apart as she sank into depression day after day. It wasn't until 1998 that she entered the Betty Ford Center. It wasn't a tabloid event or a last-ditch publicity move. She needed it to at least survive the current phase of her life. Friends, family, and her intuition told her she couldn't keep spiraling. She didn't want to become a cautionary tale. She wanted to be present for her own life. Her father, Bo, was instrumental during that time. He'd been her first manager, the one who believed in her before anyone else, and even after years of fame and friction, he stuck by her side when she decided to get help. Coming out of rehab wasn't glamorous. It was hard. She had to learn how to function without the constant buzz of alcohol, without depending on a man to validate her, and without burying the scars of her early fame. She leaned on her family. She got honest with herself. She slowed down long enough to determine what she wanted her voice to say. In 1986, she released Girls Like Me under Capitol Records. The single One Love at a Time hit number 3 on the Billboard charts. That moment was more than a comeback. It was simply her statement that she was back on her terms, and just a year later, Just Another Love became a number 1 hit. The voice hadn't gone anywhere, but the Tanya behind it had matured. The reckless energy was replaced with grounded confidence. Listeners heard a woman who had walked through fire and come out with ashes in her hair and truth in her mouth. She didn't ignore her past, but instead embraced it and even the hurts it came with. In interviews, she began to speak more openly about her relationship with Glen. She didn't gloss over the pain or try to make herself look innocent. She said what she had learned, not just what she'd endured. That distinction made her different from many artists who only tell their stories after the wounds heal. Tanya talked about her bruises while they were still tender. Fans respected her for that. After marrying Kim Woolen in 1982, Glen settled into something close to normalcy. They had 3 children together and built a quiet, mostly private life. He continued to tour, release music, and occasionally appear on television, but his days of hard partying and public drama were over. In some ways, his relationship with Tanya became the last visible sign of the chaos that had once defined him. He moved on from Tanya without much public reflection. That silence was his way of coping, but it left questions in the air, as he didn't want to be put in a place where he'd have to answer too many questions. He rarely even spoke of Tanya after their breakup. When he did, it was always dismissive and almost entirely clinical. But actions often reveal more than words. In those few interviews, there was hesitation and defensiveness. It wasn't just about protecting his reputation, but about burying that chapter. He didn't even want to think about it anymore. Emotions were real, but tangled with guilt, embarrassment, and wounds that hadn't properly healed. When Glen's Alzheimer's diagnosis was announced in 2011, everything shifted. Suddenly, the country music world wasn't looking at him as a legend, but as a man losing his memory in real time. He chose to go public with his diagnosis and perform a farewell tour with his children, backing him as part of his band. It was a rare act of vulnerability. The documentary, I'll Be Me, captured these final performances, showing his struggles on stage, his confusion, but also his bravery in facing a disease that slowly stripped him of the very gifts that made him famous. As Glen's illness progressed, Tanya watched from afar. The man she had once loved deeply, fought with passionately, and eventually lost, was fading. She wasn't invited into the inner circle. His family had long since moved on and had every reason to keep their distance. But Tanya didn't disappear. She stayed very close to the memory of what they shared. When he passed away in August 2017, she was utterly devastated. The news wasn't particularly a shock to him because he had been declining for years, but it hit him hard. She wrote a tribute on Facebook that poured out her grief. "I'm just devastated, devastated. Glen and I shared some incredible, precious memories. Forgiveness is a wonderful thing. It's why I'm releasing Forever Loving You in memory of Glen, and for all of those who are losing or have lost someone they love. I'll forever love you, Glen." That song wasn't just for Glen. Beyond Glen, it was for her. It was a final letter and her version of closure. Some fans and even members of Glen's family criticized the timing, accusing her of making the moment about herself. But Tanya didn't even budge. She said it plainly that grief shows up in different ways, and for her, the only language she ever really knew was music. Singing was how she mourned. Recording Forever Loving You gave her a way to say goodbye in a language she understood. Even years later, she talks about him as the one who mattered most, not because they were together long, but because he changed her and a lot about her. Their time together was intense, damaging, beautiful, and unforgettable. She doesn't pretend it was perfect, and she doesn't pretend it made her whole. But she credits that relationship with teaching her the most about love, addiction, power, and survival. She's been married to music longer than ever with any man, but Glen remains the exception. That's what she says. He was the one she loved too early. The one who arrived before her had the tools to hold on properly. She speaks about him with a clarity that only time and reflection can bring. And her fans believe her, not because of the words themselves, but because of how she says them. There's no performance in her voice. She didn't try to put up a facade or attempt to fake anything for the audience. It was all real and just the truth. Since then, Tanya's career has only strengthened. Her 2019 album, While I'm Livin', produced by Brandi Carlile and Shooter Jennings, brought her a Grammy for Best Country Album, her first ever. It was a full-circle moment, not just professionally, but emotionally too. The album included Bring My Flowers Now, a song that reads like a letter to her younger self and all the people she never got to say goodbye to properly, including Glen. In that song, she sings, "Bring my flowers now, while I'm living. I won't need your love when I'm gone. Don't spend time, tears, or money on my old, breathless body. If your heart is in them flowers, bring them on." It's a plea for presence, not performance, and a reminder that love matters most when it's shown in the moment, not after it's too late. In many ways, it's a song in response to what she couldn't give Glen and what he couldn't. Tanya Tucker today is not defined by heartbreak, but she doesn't run from it. She wears it like a tattoo, something painful that eventually became part of her skin. Her legacy isn't about her worst moments or even her best. It's about her honesty in both. Why their story matters. This isn't just a tale of hit records or scandal. It's a human story of love misplaced in time, of art and addiction, of how two talented people collided in search of redemption and connection. It happens, and we see it in everyday life, how two people who were once collaborating fall in love, and happenstances separate them from each other. Tanya's trajectory from prodigy at 13 to 22-year-old wild child, and then to seasoned adult singer reclaiming her power, shows a messy and absolute path. The relationship molded and forged a large part of her identity. She gained perspective, resilience, and a voice that could carry dirt roads and broken hearts. Glen's life was rooted in bigger stages and steadier applause, but that chapter with Tanya shook him. He walked away, built stability, and later faced illness without retreat. His silence on their love affair spoke volumes about his need to preserve order after chaos. The story reflects broader truths together and teaches us that you can have fame, but still suffer depression in silence. We also learn from it that fame can help deepen intimacy and even fracture it. Addiction can feel like love until you wake up and realize you're bleeding. Youth can carry passion but lack staying power. Time strips illusions and leaves only what was there. In the years since, they have used their art to speak. Tanya does it through albums, duets, and public candor, while Glen does it through performances in memory and a film that captured his last stand. Their legacies overlap in those few recordings and in the intensity of that time. What do you think about the love story of Tanya and Glen? Kindly share your thoughts in the comments and endeavor to like this video and share.